So hello, welcome. So I'm RTK2, one of the team. So particularly warm welcome if it's your first time at the Buddhist Centre or if you haven't been coming for that long. It's quite a thing to come into a centre with this number of people and sometimes not knowing anybody. So good on you, kind of well done. You've made that step. It's quite brave actually. Maybe you didn't expect so many people. So the talk that I'm going to give today is called Seeing Suffering, Ending Suffering. That's the title. And I kind of thought, well, maybe in some respects it's a little bit of a strange title, or you might think that, because you probably see suffering very regular. Maybe you read the news, you check your phone, you see the homeless. So you see suffering, but your suffering hasn't ended. So what kind of seeing am I talking about when I say seeing suffering, ending suffering? That's what I'm going to be talking about through the course of the talk. And a while ago I gave a talk, and what I said was that Buddhism gives us ways to reduce our suffering. So we've just done the metta practice, or we could have done the mindfulness of breathing. We just meditated, and I don't know about you, but it's quite magic. I find sometimes I come into the Buddhist Centre, I'm in a particular state of mind. I might be tired, I might be feeling a bit sad, I might be many things, anxious, giving a talk, nervous, and then it's like you sit to meditate for however long, 30, 40 minutes, or maybe less, and you feel different. So it's like very quickly you can get a sense of that actually by practicing something from Buddhism, your suffering reduces. So that's worth knowing, isn't it? It's a good thing. But Buddhism goes further than that. This is what I also said in the other talk. So it doesn't just want to reduce suffering, it wants to end suffering. That's the goal of Buddhism. And it doesn't want to end suffering just for you, it wants to end suffering for all beings. That's the aim. So Siddhartha is the man that became the Buddha, became the awakened one, the Buddha. He was very deeply affected by suffering, the suffering that he saw around him, and he wanted to find a solution to that. He wanted to find a solution to the problem of suffering, and that led him on a quest, on a journey. So there's a particular sutta where he talks about that, like kind of what was driving his search. So to say a little bit like that, I'll say a little bit about existence, so to understand what he says. So Buddhism says that existence is of two kinds. So there's conditioned existence and there's unconditioned existence. And in a sense, you could say that the talk that I'm going to give, the first part is more about conditioned existence, and then I'm going to attempt to point towards the unconditioned. It's not so easy to talk about, so it's pointing towards the unconditioned. So conditioned, the original word in Pali for that is samskrita, and it means compounded or put together. Yeah, so in terms of the kind of the story itself, so the story of Siddhartha's life, he says that when you're searching to end suffering, when you're searching for lasting happiness, you can go in two directions. So this is going to sound a little bit technical, what I'm going to say next, but hopefully it'll get a bit clearer as I talk more. So what Siddhartha said was, he says that the search can start by the conditioned going in search of the conditioned, or the compounded going in search of the compounded. That's one direction. Or the conditioned or compounded can go in search of the unconditioned or the uncompounded. That's the other kind of way it can go. And if the conditioned goes in search of the conditioned, what you end up with is suffering. If the conditioned goes in search of the unconditioned, where you end up is with lasting happiness, peace, and the end of suffering. So I'll read, I don't know if this will make it any clearer or not, but I'll read something from the Pali Canon, the kind of early teachings of the Buddha. So this is what he says. And it is interesting, I think, with the early Buddhism, it's got a particular way of talking, it's got a particular language. It can have a particular feel. Later teachings have got a slightly different feel. You'll get a sense of what I mean. So what he said was, he says, bhikkhus, or disciples, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too, being myself subject to birth, sought what was also subject to birth. Being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow and defilement, I sought what was also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow and defilement. Suppose that being myself subject to birth, I seek the unborn, supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Suppose that being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow and defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, death, sorrow and defilement, I seek the unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless and undefiled, the supreme security from bondage, nibbana. So to repeat, so when we seek the conditioned or the compounded, because it's compounded or put together, it will eventually fall apart and end in suffering. So maybe just to give you an example of that. So I suppose when this teaching became a little bit more clearer for me was around the time of my dad's death. So I was in my early 20s. It was quite a shock. I was very shocked, shaken, sad by that. And my dad died of lung cancer. So we are an organism, and an organism means we've got organs. We've got lots of different organs. We've got the heart, we've got the lungs, we've got the spleen, we've got the liver, we've got the intestines. Everything is working together. But then when one element of that starts to not work kind of well and eventually can't function, then the whole kind of collapses. So I suppose what I'm saying is, it's like my father and us, we're all compounded, made up of parts. When one part ceases to function, then the whole kind of ceases. So it's a bit of a sad story, but it kind of gives you a sense of what it's kind of getting at, really. Maybe the first part of the talk is going to be a little bit more, because I suppose it's interesting. I think what I noticed is, preparing for this talk, talking about suffering, it kind of takes you into that territory more. I suppose to prepare a talk means you've got to try to practice what you preach, really. So it's like I've been turning my mind more and more to this over the week. It's got a particular feel, at least the first part of the talk. So so when we seek what is unconditioned or uncompounded, what we can find is lasting happiness, peace, and the end of suffering. And Buddhism is saying it's only the unconditioned that can do that. That's important. So at this point, it's probably worth saying a little bit about what does what does a conditioned mean? How can we identify what the conditioned is? I've just had a little bit with the example. But the Buddha says, and some of you have heard this a few times, Buddhism says the conditioned existence has 3 marks or 3 characteristics. So conditioned existence is impermanent or subject to change. It's suffering, or it has the characteristic of unsatisfactoriness. So it's not able to bring us lasting happiness. And it's devoid of self. So they're the 3 marks or the 3 characteristics of conditioned existence, and everything within the universe is kind of run through with those 3 marks. So that's what I call the 3 lakshanas. I'm going to talk about them a bit later. And the reason why I'm talking about them, again, this is important, I'm talking about them because we want to liberate ourselves from them. So it's not just to kind of be doom and gloom and talk lots and lots about suffering. I am going to be talking about suffering today. But the idea is that we get clearer about what suffering is, and then we can liberate ourselves from it. So again, this is a kind of a list that the Buddha gave of the 7 types of suffering. So he says birth is suffering, decay and old age, sickness, death. To be joined with what one dislikes is suffering. To be separated from what one likes is suffering. And to not get what one wants is suffering. So those of you in the WhatsApp group for this class, I kind of put that in as to pay attention to that. What is it like when we don't get what we want? Kind of how does that manifest? What thoughts come, what emotions come, how does that feel in the body? And how do we relate to all of those things? That's what I asked. So I'm not going to say anything about the first 4, I'm just going to say a little bit about these. And then the tone of the talk might change a bit. So to be joined with what one dislikes. So that can be many things. So it could be somebody, it could be a family member. And maybe we don't like them because they're quite different from us. They've got different political views. They live quite a different life. Maybe they're quite, critical or controlling. Maybe they seem quite stuck. Maybe this person indulges quite a bit in quite destructive behaviour. Maybe they're violent. But this person is a family member. Maybe it's your brother, maybe it's your sister, maybe it's your mum, maybe it's your dad, grandfather, grandmother, whatever, auntie, uncle. So some of those people you live with, or you have to live with for a period of time, and that's not easy. So you don't like them. This is what it can be like in our families, can't it, if we're honest? Maybe we don't like certain members of our families, but we're connected to them. We're kind of like, we're just connected to them. They're part of our family. It could be our job. So we're doing a job, we have to earn money, we have to pay our Krankenkasse, we have to buy our food. But actually the job that we're doing we really don't like. It's boring, or it's tedious, or it's monotonous, or the people that we work with, our boss, our colleagues, are kind of irritating or controlling, or they don't communicate well, they're quite demanding. So we're in this situation and we don't want to be in it. We'd rather be doing something else. We'd rather be at home. We'd rather be doing something creative, kind of whatever it might be. But we don't really want to be there. So we're joined to what we dislike. So to be separated from what one likes. So I think it's quite interesting. The thing that was coming to mind for me this week about this was, so being part of this community, part of this Sangha, lots of people come and they stay and sometimes they go. So you've got people that you want to spend time with, that you would like to spend more time with, that you love and care about, but actually for them, maybe Berlin just doesn't work. So it's like the conditions have come together. So everything arises in dependence on conditions. This person is here. You become friends with them. You want to spend time with them. You'd like to spend maybe the rest of your life being in relationship to this person. But actually, there are other conditioning factors at play. Maybe this person doesn't get on with Berlin. Maybe they found it difficult learning German. Maybe they've had enough of German bureaucracy. Maybe I've heard somebody say that was one of the reasons for leaving. Maybe they've got better job prospects somewhere else, yeah, or they've got property in another country. So that person leaves. So we're separated from what we like. That is a form of dukkha. That is a form of suffering. And then I suppose you've also got things like, well, I've said, haven't I, about the kind of the death of a loved one or the separation in terms of a relationship, somebody that we, at least for a period, kind of love and care about. We want to spend time with them. It's great being in this relationship, but they don't want to be with us. Maybe they're interested in someone else. Maybe they've got a bit bored, whatever. But there's a separation. We're separated from what we like. And then lastly, not to get what one wants. So imagine, if you pay attention, you probably, or if you think back over your week, there's probably been a number of occasions, maybe even just in this morning, there's been these instances where we haven't got what we want. So an example from the week for me. So I was with my daughter. She was not in a great mood. She was quite sort of a bit cryy, and we went doing a bit of pottery together. That wasn't working. Everything I said to her didn't help. We went for some food. I ordered some food. It came. It was a particular dish, a kind of a sabzi kind of curry, and she's used to it being quite liquidy. So she likes the liquid element to it. She doesn't like the vegetables. But this particular curry in this particular place had hardly any liquid. So I ordered this food. I was going to buy this food, and she just didn't seem like she was going to eat it. And it was like that moment of kind of, she did end up eating, and actually after she ate, she was better. But there was that moment for me of like, I really don't want this to happen. Like, kind of, I'm paying for this meal, it's quite expensive, and actually she's not going to eat it. But that is just how it was. Yeah. And then another example. So, as a job, I'm a cleaner. I think it's interesting being a cleaner. Sometimes you talk to people and you say, they ask you, what's your job? And you say, I'm a cleaner. And it's a real conversation killer. It's like, what do they say to that? They can't really relate to it. People know what cleaning's like, but it's like, it's what they don't want to do. So it's like, oh. Well, anyway, so I'm a cleaner. And I went to this job, and I've got to take cleaning cloths, and I've got to take mop heads to this particular job. And I got there, and they weren't in my bag. And I was like, really? Like, kind of, I suppose it's interesting maybe with this, not getting what one wants. It's like, the first thing that I went into was denial. Like, they were obviously not there. But actually, like, I was like, I just couldn't kind of admit that to myself. Like, yeah, but you've just forgotten them. Because it's like, it's an inconvenience. What am I going to do now? I'm at this job. I've got cleaning products to spray, but I've got no cloths to kind of use. So obviously I had to make do, and I did clean and all the rest of it. But it was that sense of like not getting what you want, not getting what one wants. Yeah, so I suppose the first thing to say is that this whole area of dukkha or suffering, maybe the first step with it to get in relationship to it is just to name it, actually. It's like sometimes we start to struggle with aspects of our experience, and then actually if we can just name it, oh, this is suffering, it actually eases the load a little bit. It kind of like there's a sort of a bit more of a relaxation that kind of happens just by naming. So that's the first thing that I want to say. Just name it. And it's also like, I think the good thing about these kind of lists is when you've got a little bit of familiarity with them, well, when they occur in your life, like I've kind of given some examples, it's like you remember, oh, this is what the Buddha was talking about, wasn't he? He said conditioned existence is suffering. And here it is in my experience. I don't want it, but there it is. This is just what it's like to suffer, to experience unsatisfactoriness. So, are you impressed? So I'm just going to go through what's on this board. I'm not going to go through every single thing that's written on there. There's a lot of stuff, but the main things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on one of the lakshanas. So the lakshanas, the three marks of conditioned existence. Well, I'm going to say what's all on the board, but then we're going to go kind of up through this central kind of point. We're going to look at this lakshana of suffering. So, like I said, Buddhism is saying conditioned existence has these three marks, these three characteristics. And the three characteristics are that conditioned existence is impermanent, it's unsatisfactory, and it's devoid of self. What Buddhism also is saying is that you can kind of go through these things and you kind of go through a doorway. The doorway, so that's what this is, the Vimoksha Mukhas, or gateways to liberation. When you meditate on these things, you can enter a door which leads to liberation. So the liberation that's related to impermanence is the signless or the imageless. The liberation that's related to unsatisfactoriness, so above it, is the unbiased, the unaiming, or the wishless. Sometimes the words are a bit funny, but they'll become a bit clearer as I talk, I think. And then if you go through this particular doorway, devoid of self, where you end up is emptiness or shunyata. And then what you've got at the top is you've kind of got what would it be like if, what is the enlightened mind like? Yeah, so from the perspective, well, it's enlightened, but from the perspective of the Yogacara, they also, it's another form of later interpretation of Buddhism, they talk about pure awareness, or some schools of Buddhism talk about the nature of mind. And this nature of mind has got these three qualities. So it's like if you're going through this particular doorway, so impermanence, signless, kind of the quality or the quality of mind, and what's there, what's innate, is this clarity or luminosity. If you go through this particular doorway, where you end up with is, so the doorway of suffering, through the unbiased to sensitivity or responsiveness. If you go through devoid of self to emptiness, where you end up is openness or spaciousness. So like I said, we're going to try to travel a little bit through this doorway, at least kind of in our imagination. And what I'm talking about now really is, I'm talking more about insight. So what we're doing with insight is that we're trying to look at our experience from a particular perspective, a particular angle. It's generally done within meditation. But it can be done at kind of any time in a certain sense. So when we're trying to see conditioned existence as subject to suffering, we're entering the realm of what's called vipassana. Vipassana in Pali means insight when it's translated into English. So insight is not an intellectual understanding. So it's kind of generally developed when the mind is purified, when the mind is concentrated, when the mind is absorbed. And it has, as the basis, it has ethics and meditation. Meditation in the sense of absorption. And what Sangharakshita says about it is it's a direct intuitive perception that takes place in the depths of meditation when the ordinary mental processes have fallen into obeisance. So it kind of means that your mind is not so distracted. There's not much distraction going on in the mind. The mind is very clear, it's stable, it's positive. Positivity is really important when we're looking in this kind of way. It's absorbed. So if we think about that last list that we was looking at, these kind of 7 types of suffering, you could ask why or how does suffering arise? And in terms of kind of these 3 lakshanas, well, what we see is that there's a relationship in how suffering arises in relationship to these 3 lakshanas, these 3 marks of conditioned existence. So because we don't see that things change, that things are impermanent, we suffer. And because we take change in experience, particularly like our change in experience, so our body, our feelings, our volitions, our consciousness, because we don't see all of that as changing, we take that to be a self, and we suffer. So we also kind of we take all of that as I and me and mine. That's kind of like what we do. Rather than seeing that these changing aspects of experience, that's all they are. They just change. Everything's just coming and going, and actually there is no fixed self there. That's more this particular lakshana. So we try to fix and stabilise what has the nature of change. Kind of we're doing that all of the time. And we're ignoring, which is related to ignorance, we're ignoring the facts of existence and we're resisting the facts of existence. So suffering is the refusal to see things the way they are. That's what it is. So there are 2 things that we need to do. So one of them is that we need to align ourselves with the way things are. We need to align ourselves with the fact that everything changes, for one thing. And we also need to see what happens when we're not aligned. So that's probably what we're more used to kind of in our experience. So when we're not aligned, what's tending to happen is that we're fighting or we're resisting aspects of experience. And when we do that, we suffer. And our suffering kind of develops in two ways. So it either develops as a wanting, we want certain things, or we don't want certain things. That's how the suffering kind of moves. Craving and aversion. We crave things, we don't want things. So with this action, we're trying to see how do we relate to experience. And it's probably easier to see in terms of how do we relate to pain. And when I say pain, I mean in terms of unpleasant sensation. So normally what happens when we experience unpleasant sensations, so say for instance when I was with my daughter and she didn't want to eat her food, what would have been happening for me is there was an unpleasantness to that, an unpleasant sensation. And it's like I could quickly go into the reaction and resisting. Like if I would have gone down the line of kind of like telling her she needs to eat her food and get really angry and kind of all of the rest of it, well, it probably wouldn't have helped any of us. It's very easy to do as a parent. But that's more like the resisting, the kind of the shutting off, the not wanting, the tightening in relationship to what is actually going on. And what we need to do is we need to see all of that with kindness, and we need to come back in relationship to, particularly to the body. How does that feel in the body? It's a very good question to ask yourself quite regular, particularly when we're suffering. So moving up through this, so from unsatisfactoriness into this kind of liberation, the liberation of the unbiased, or the unaiming, or the wishless. So I'm saying that suffering is the resistance to pain. So this unpleasant sensation, or there's a wish to stabilize or to continue experience pleasant sensation. This is what we're kind of trying to do. The first thing leads to aversion, and the second thing leads to craving. And what we're trying to do is try to be with things just as they are. Unpleasant sensation is unpleasant. But when we react with aversion, we want to move away, we want to distance ourselves from it, which is suffering when that happens. So this particular liberation, it's unbiased because it doesn't move. It rests. So again, this is what Sangharakshita says. It says it's actually about resting. So it's like our awareness rests with how things are. And it's called, we rest with how things are, and we allow sensations to come and go. We allow our experience to come and go. So the coming and going is also the alignment part, this sense of impermanence. And it's the wishless liberation. You move into the wishless liberation because when you're in that kind of state, it doesn't sound very positive, does it, wishless? But when you're in that kind of state, you don't wish it to be any other than it is. So it's like, if I was really experiencing this liberation, as I'm sat there with my daughter at the table and she doesn't want to eat the food and I'm going to pay for it, it's like, that is the facts. Actually, in that moment it changed, but that is the facts. That is how it is. And I have a response to that. Well, probably if I was enlightened, I wouldn't be having this kind of response to it. But it's like not wishing to have another response. I'm just having a response. So if I start to wish it to be other than it is, I'm resisting and I'm closing off and I'm not wanting to have that experience, which is suffering. It doesn't mean, wishless doesn't mean that we don't have any wishes, and we don't, in our normal day-to-day life, like we don't change conditions for the better. So it's that sense of, I wish things to be better, and then I change conditions. It's not saying, it's not wishless in that sense. It's wishless more in relationship to our own internal experience. It's like really learning to kind of allow and be with experience as it is. So I would say that we get a glimpse of this within the Metta-bhavana. When we bring the difficult person to mind, and when we experience what we experience, whatever that might be, it might be unpleasant sensation in the body, it might be thoughts, it might be emotions. If we can just again just notice if we're starting to react, notice this is suffering actually. How I'm reacting in this situation, how I'm reacting even in my own mind in the Metta-bhavana, is suffering. And if I can come more in relationship with just how does that feel, the pain of that. Oh, my body is starting to tighten and close down, or my mind is racing in this particular way. It's like if I can come into relationship with that with kindness, the suffering eases. And the more we do that over time, the more we're able to do that over time, and the deeper that we kind of see that, at some point that shifts the balance in our experience. So it's a lot about relationship. Like I kind of tend to think Buddhism is a lot about relationship. How am I relating to experience? How am I relating to other people? And if we can relate in a way, relate with kindness, but also relate in a way which is taking some of these into consideration, the fact that things change, just the fact that there is suffering, that can have a profound effect. Like the relationship to experience can change, and it can change radically actually. So I'm just gonna finish by just saying a little bit about this particular quality. So the quality of sensitivity or responsiveness. So I suppose what I really like about this this model is, well, for one thing, it's kind of saying this particular part is saying that when the mind is free from greed, hatred and delusion, what is left is not a blank. What is left is a sense of, there are different ways of talking about this, but this is one way. There's a sense of spaciousness and openness. There's a sense of clarity and luminosity. And there's a sense of sensitivity and responsiveness. So this particular quality really reminds us that even when we're talking about suffering, the enlightened mind is an enlightened heart. It's very responsive and it's very sensitive. It's got a vast capacity to hold suffering, our own suffering, and also the suffering of others. It also brings in the quality of compassion in relationship to suffering, and I suppose it corrects any misunderstandings we might have in relationship to Buddhism, in relationship to things like sometimes Buddhism can be talked about as a sort of detachment. Yeah, we're detached. But the awakened mind is not aloof, and it's not cold. it's completely connected to ourselves and to all beings. It's kind of completely responsive. I think that will do, actually.